Hi, welcome to NicheCraft. My name is Cassie and I'm your host. And today I am going to be showing you everything that you will need if you want to start working with acid dyes. This should go without saying, but I did want to show you that I have some hanks of undyed wool, and acid dyes work with animal fibers. So what you're going to need is yarn that has some kind of animal fiber in it. So we're talking wool, alpaca, angora, merino, those kinds of fibers. You can't use acid dyes on cotton or acrylic and expect the same results that you would get with wool. All right. So in addition to the yarn, you're going to need some acid dyes. The acid dyes that I'm working with today are Jacquard's acid dyes, and they come in a lot of different colors. I've just put out a few that I have here. A blue one, a pink one, I believe there's a black one, a yellow one, and a green one, and yeah, the green one's on the end. So you're going to need to be able to invest in some acid dyes. Acid dyes are actually pretty inexpensive, especially these small jars. They're typically under $9 in US dollars, and that is as of 2022. So now I'd like to talk about safety equipment. So there are a few safety hazards to keep in mind when you're working with acid dyes, and the best way to protect against these safety hazards is with a respirator mask, some protective goggles. These go over my glasses, guys, for those of you who wonder, and some gloves. Now, there's some other safety precautions you can take, but I want to explain why you would need especially these three items, okay? The gloves, the respirator mask, and the goggles. So, the most common hazard with acid dye powder, and remember, this comes in a powder. If we make a dye stock solution, that will become completely stable in water, okay? But the most common safety hazards are inhalation, skin contact, and eye contact. Now, the skin contact, it's not going to, your skin will not absorb acid dye, but it might be irritated by acid dye. And some people have sensitive skin, so of course keep that in mind. To use an abundance of precaution, you might also want to wear long sleeve shirts and long pants just to make sure that you are completely covered from head to toe. You might even want to wear an apron to cover your clothes. So I just wanted to mention that. And then the other safety precaution that you need to think about is the hazardous components of decomposition. Now, decomposition in these powders is we're only talking about the powders, like if there's powder particles on your surface, right, and it comes into contact with air, then it can turn into some harmful chemicals like CO2 and sulfur oxide and some others, okay? So to prevent any kind of hazards from the decomposition process, I have that in the way here. I have purchased a shower curtain liner, and what I'm going to do is I am going to spread this out on my work surface as I'm mixing my dye stocks, because as I'm mixing my dye stocks, that's the only time I'm going to be coming in contact with it if it's powder, okay? So, of course, now you're going to need to know what you need in order to mix the dye stocks. All right, so here we go. You will need some kind of kitchen scale or a scale that is capable of measuring very tiny amounts of weight. All right. You're going to need some measuring spoons. Okay, so what I'm going to be using these two is to scoop out the dye powder and put them in whatever I'm mixing with water. Okay, you're going to need something to mix it in. Right here, this is actually a plastic container, but it might be better to use a glass container just because of resistance to heat. You're going to need some kind of bottle to store it in that has a lid. Now I have a lid on this, but I'm getting ready to mix my first dye stock solution, so I'm going to need that open. In addition to that funnel here, here's a funnel. Okay, you're going to need a funnel, and the main reason is so that you can pour the solution into your container. Now, you can also use mason jars for this, but these plastic bottles are just fine. They're just as safe as long as you have a lid with them. That's all you really need. So just kind of keep that in mind. Other items that you will probably want, in fact, I would say this is a need, is some way to label the dye stock solution. Okay, so I have this masking tape, and I've got to be honest, my dog actually got a hold of this and like chewed on it and then we like just threw it in our junk drawer, and I found it and I was like, okay, we're not using this, so I'm just going to use this masking tape that's kind of nasty to label my stock solutions on these bottles. Okay, so just wanted to mention that. And lastly, you're going to need something to dye your yarn in. So what this is a relic. I got this pot when I moved out of my parents' house in 2000, when I was age 20, or no, I was 19. So this right here, this right here is 22 years old. Can you imagine that? I'm serious. Yeah, we weren't using this. We had actually put it in a donate pile, but I found it and I was like, I'm gonna just use this pot to dye my yarns in. That way I'm not using anything that can come in contact with food. That is a big no-no for anything that has any kind of hazardous chemicals in it. All right. So in order to get the yarn to the dye to bind with the yarn, you're going to need some kind of acid, and the most commonly available ones that I've seen people use is vinegar or citric acid. Now I happen to have both. This citric acid actually came with a jacquard dye set. It was 4 different colors, and then they added the citric acid for me, but I actually prefer using vinegar. So it doesn't matter either way, but just know that that is what actually binds it to the fiber. So you are going to need some kind of acid to help the dye bind. Okay. I have also included on the table just a couple of other things that'll just make my job easier. I have these old spoons and even a fork. These I believe came from when Greg was in college. so yeah, we've got this stuff is all stuff that we are not using for any kind of food or anything like that. So this is going to go in a big box that is my dye box, so that it will only be used for dye. Okay? So the zip ties and the tongs serve the same purpose. It just depends on which one I want to use at that moment. So going back to the yarn, I just want to show you. I have these zip ties around the hanks of yarn. I can use these to lift the yarn up with, right? And it keeps the hank from getting tangled. Somebody had asked me in a previous video, how do you keep the hanks from getting tangled? This is how. Just making sure that you have them sectioned off. Now, hanks are already sectioned off with little pieces of string around them, but if you want to make sure that nothing goes awry, this is one way to do it. Okay? And of course, the tongs can be used to flip over the yarn and pick it up while it's hot, if I am heat setting the yarn. Okay? So we have gone over everything that is on this counter that I'm going to be needing to make dye. And I just wanted to show you a few options. Okay, so I have these. These I can use to measure out 5 milliliters. Okay, and I can either drop the dye on it, or I can just measure out 5 milliliters and put it in a pan of water, just any way that I want. So I've got these droppers. I think that helps. I even have this acid dye mixing chart that came with that set I was talking about. So we have this, and then we also have recipes on the back for different colors. And this also has recipes for different colors as well. So I think that that's really cool. I don't know if I'm going to actually use this, but just so you know, when I am mixing dyes, if I do, I will be writing that down. So making sure you have something to write on so that you can keep track of how you're dyeing your yarn is probably important. I also have these plastic cups. I like to use these to put dye in to then pour into the yarn. So that's what I'm going to be using this. Like once I make my stock solutions, then I'll probably pour just a little bit into the cup and then use that to pour into the yarn. And that would be the way that I would control for that. I still have these little brushes that can be used to hand paint yarn. Mine are actually really small, so they probably aren't the best size, but it is a good example of what you could use. And obviously I have extra bottles, extra cups, extra utensils, and I found this chemistry set that I had, and I thought, hey, this might help because it also has these squeeze tubes and everything. It's glass too. But I wasn't using it for anything else, so I thought, hey, I can use this for dyeing my yarn. So that said, that's all you need in order to dye yarn with acid dye.
Okay, it's recording.